And so we'll be in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43. And so if you would, turn in your Bibles to verse 21, and this is what it says. It says, Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. Let me ask you this question today. You ever been desperate? You ever had a desperate moment in life? I mean, it doesn't even have to be like a serious moment. You ever had I remember I was going through a season where I was dieting real hard. I was working out real hard, and my diet was very strict. And I remember one night, I woke up in the middle of the night, like about 3 in the morning, really, and I was starving. Like I was voraciously hungry. Like I was shaking, like my hands were trembling, and I was tingly all over. And so I go to the refrigerator at like 3 in the morning, open it up, it's the only light on, it's like a miracle coming out. And I just grabbed, the first thing I grabbed was like a box of strawberries. And I just sat there right there at the fridge, piling strawberries in my mouth because I was desperate. I was hungry. I needed something, and I needed to satiate that hunger immediately because I was so desperate. I think I grabbed like slices of cheese, whatever I could, because I was just so hungry and I needed it right then. And I was desperate for it. Desperation is the state of being driven to urgent action by extreme need or hopelessness. And so what we have here is we have Jesus. He's come back over the Sea of Galilee. Remember a few weeks back when we were in the previous chapters, we talked about the storm that happened. And Jesus has come back over, and Jesus encounters Jairus. Now, Jairus is a synagogue ruler. He's a prominent religious leader. And so he's got a very good standing in the community. And he has a personal crisis going on. His daughter's sick. She's so sick that she's on the brink of death. And so Jairus doesn't come anymore as the synagogue leader. He doesn't come as the person who has all the answers. He now comes as the person who is in need, desperate need. He is very desperate, and he throws himself at the feet of Jesus. His position, his title, all that stuff goes out the window. If you've ever been desperate before, or something's been going on that was big in your life, man, titles, all the other things seem to just fade away. They become very less important. And this is what happened here. Jairus comes to Jesus, not as the one with all the answers, but he comes as the one in need. And I think sometimes when we're not desperate, we have a tendency to go to God, and we go to him and we'll be like, God, I need you to do A, B, and C. Because this is what I need in my life, God. But when you're desperate, and all you have is hope, because hope in Jesus, because everything else is hopeless. All these things fade away, and he publicly humbles himself, driven by a situation that is beyond his control. You ever want to feel helpless? You ever want to feel hopeless? Remember, it's when you realize in this world that you can't control very many things. And this is what Jairus is realizing. And his desperation strips away his pride, and it's leading him into a profound moment of dependence upon Jesus. And this is what I want you to talk about, or I want you to realize today as we talk about desperation. And we're going to talk about how we can go from desperation to restoration. And I want you to ask this question. You may be in a season of desperation. You may have been in a season of desperation. But I want to ask this question. Is this desperation pushing you closer or further from Jesus? Does your desperation push you closer or further from Jesus? And so Jairus comes. He has one need. His standing in the community no longer matters. He throws himself at the feet of Jesus. Jesus, come with me. My daughter is about to die. She is deathly ill. Come with me now. And so let's keep going. Let's go to verse 25. This is what it says. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. And so Jesus, remember, we've talked about this in every chapter. Everywhere Jesus goes, there is a crowd of people. They are flocking to him. So a woman in the crowd who had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed from her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing in around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." And so we have this interruption in Jairus' story, and it's somebody else who has a certain standing in the community. It's a woman who has suffered with an issue of blood. She's bleeding, which makes her, according to Jewish law, makes her ceremonially unclean. So she can't even be there. Technically, she should not even be in this crowd of people. And then because she's so desperate, desperation moves you to do things, right? And that's, again, this question. Does your desperation push you towards God, or does it push you further away from God? And this woman comes. She's not supposed to be there. She's spent all her money. Think about this. Doctors probably took advantage of her. I'm speculating here, but they're probably, "Yeah, sure, we can cure your disease. We'll cure it. Just pay me this money." And she keeps going, spending all of her money. She has nothing left. She's isolated. So imagine she's bleeding. She can't be around her family because she's unclean. And she's a woman. You might not like it, but that's the way society was at this time. That's the way culture was at this time. And what does she do? She comes someplace she's not supposed to be. She reaches out and she touches a man. She touches the hem of his garment. But this is where desperation has brought her, right? She's so desperate, she's low in the crowd. She touches the hem of his garment. That's down there. She had to be low. She crawls up, touches the hem of his garment. And all of a sudden, Jesus goes, "Pooh, who touched me?" And he's with the crowd of people. Imagine this, right? Who touched me? His disciples are like, "How can you even ask that question? Look around you. How many people are brushing against you and touching you?" He's like, "No, I felt healing power go out." And so he looks around, and imagine the fear. Think about it. It's not just as easy as saying, "Oh, it was me." Because technically, there should be consequences for what she's done. She has brought her uncleanness into the rest of everybody, and she touched, which technically she would have made Jesus unclean. And so when he's saying, "Who touched me?" and she knows it's her, she's now got to be afraid of punishment. How many times do I think that's we come before Jesus and we bring our issues and we bring our problems, and sometimes in our mind, we're afraid now, I'm going to receive the consequences for what I've done. That's not what happens when she meets Jesus. Instead, Jesus does what? He calls her out. He listens to her entire story. And he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." And what he does is he shows us that he takes her from desperation to restoration. And it's not just her physical healing. He restores her back to her standing in the community when he calls her daughter. So understand this. Jesus, he's taking her from desperation to restoration. And so this woman's desperation pushes her past every obstacle. Are you desperate enough today to go towards God and push through any obstacle that would stand in your way? Do you live your life that way? Do we live our life in this desperation for God and complete dependence upon him? She believes in Jesus' power enough to risk everything to touch his garment. It's It's not a passive faith. It's an active faith. She's risking everything. And she acts with a persistent faith despite her hopelessness. See, desperation, it can either paralyze you or it can push you forward into deeper trust in God. And so, are you pressing into Jesus today? Are you desperate enough to press in to Jesus? Now, this is an interruption, right? There's something else that's been going on this entire time, and it was urgent, right? Like Jairus wasn't just like, hey, maybe you can come to my house tomorrow, check on my daughter, maybe heal her if you got some time. It's not how it was going down. Jairus is like, you have to come now. And so imagine he's walking through this crowd of people, and every time Jesus slows down or stops, he's like, Jairus, Jesus, you got to come on. My daughter needs you. My daughter needs you now. And then all of a sudden, you saw the disciples' response, but this is Jairus who's desperate. Imagine his response. Why are you stopping? Who touched you? Everybody touched you. And then to top it all off, it's a woman. If there's going to be an interruption, it's going to be a woman. Just come on. We have to understand that, right? And so he's like, woman, what are you doing? And then she gets healed. She's healed. The exact same thing that he needs. And then Jesus listens to the whole story. He's got to be like, come on, woman, shut your mouth. You got your healing. Now go. Right? That's how he's got to feel. And Jairus' perspective is he has this urgent plea for help, and suddenly it's interrupted by this woman who'd suffered for 12 years. And it would have been easy for Jairus in that moment to slip into comparison. It would have been easy for him to start thinking, why is Jesus stopping for her when my daughter needs help? And you start comparing things, and comparison could quickly lead Jairus toward more desperation. Right? Think about it. Like he's like, I'm a religious leader. I'm a man, right? This is the culture. She's a woman. I'm a man. I have preference. Why are you stopping for her? I need a miracle now. And he could, if he looked at this, he could say, my miracle's slipping away because you're stopping and giving a miracle to her. And similarly, I think we often look at things and we think somebody else's blessing, somebody else's breakthrough, somebody else's healing is going to somehow take away from ours. Like there's not enough Jesus to go around. Except Jesus demonstrates clearly that another person's miracle does not diminish our own hope. Here's the problem. Sometimes we look at somebody else's miracle and we say, why can't I get that miracle? And the problem is you know what comparison does? Comparison will deepen your desperation. If you're always looking around at somebody and you're always saying, oh, look at that miracle. Look what God did for them. Man, I've been serving God for 14 years. And I've been praying for this same thing all that time. And I haven't seen a miracle yet. Yet this person gets saved in one day and they got a miracle as well. We have this temptation to compare ourselves to others. And what we forget, man, is Jesus is personal. Man, and it's hard for us to fathom, right? Because Jesus can be 100% with Karen, 100% with Rebecca, 100% with Kai. He can be 100% with every single one of us, and we don't understand that. Because you and I, we can't be 100% with. If I'm 100% with Karen, then Karen's getting everything. Nobody else is getting anything, right? You understand? That's how we are in life. That's how you are with all of your relationships. I can give a little here, I can give a little here, and if I got to give more over here, something else is going to have to come down. That's why it's hard for us to fathom. But that's not the way God works. That's not the way Jesus is. He's your personal Savior. He's your personal Savior. He's your personal Savior. And He is there, and He is seeking you with all of His attention, something only God can do. Something only God can do. And if we slip into this idea of comparing, then it only deepens our desperation. See, His compassion, Jesus' compassion and His power are abundant and enough for everyone. And we must learn that Jesus' timing is perfect. So many times we think, I need this now. You go to God, God, I have to have this now. I need to see results now. And Jesus has taken His time. Right? And you and I, we're getting more desperate. And in that desperation, you can go one of two ways. It can push you deeper into trust, or it can paralyze you and push you away from trust. And see, comparison often serves as a pathway to desperation because it shifts our focus away from God's faithfulness and it shifts our focus to somebody else's circumstances. I'm looking at Brad and saying, look at all that Brad has. Look at what I don't get. Look how desperate I am, and look at what Brad's getting. And that's how our focus shifts, because it shifts away from what Jesus wants to do in me to what Brad is doing and everything that's going on in Brad's life. And that's the problem with comparison. And when we constantly measure our lives and our blessings and our miracles and our healings against somebody else, it always leaves us lacking. We can't find contentment. And it either makes us prideful, look at what I've got that they don't, or it leads us to more deeply discouragement. And we can become more and more desperate. Instead of celebrating what God has uniquely given us or trusting in His perfect timing and provision, comparison usually breeds dissatisfaction, insecurity, and ultimately despair. This kind of desperation is destructive because it isolates us from gratitude and joy, pushing us away from trusting God's plan and towards an endless chase of what we think we lack. And often we tend to become fixated on somebody else's miracle. And it's not just that we want, like, God, do that same thing for me. But God is personal, and His miracles are personal. And everything, He wants to do something completely different in your life. That's completely different in your life. That's completely different in your life, because that's the God who created the world. That is God. Right? And so He knows precisely what your restoration looks like. And it's unique for each of us. And it doesn't match a miracle that we've seen in somebody else's life. So many times we look at somebody else's miracle and we want that in our life. And so imagine you have Jairus, this giant interruption has happened. And he's desperate at this point. And his desperation reaches its peak in verse 35. Let's read it. While he was still speaking to her, the messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith." When Jairus hears that his daughter has died, imagine, he's gone to all this effort. Now there's been this interruption, and now she's dead. Man, talk about desperation and despair at its fullness. It reaches its peak. And at this moment, Jesus speaks some powerful words. What does He say? He says, "Do not fear, only believe." Do not fear. Don't be afraid, just have faith. Jairus must trust beyond his visible reality. See, Jesus recognizes this crucial moment in his journey and in his this spiritual testing. And what does Jesus do? He immediately challenges Jairus not to yield to fear, but to remain steadfast in belief. And we need to see that true faith endures when circumstances appear to be hopeless. Now, listen, I don't want you to misunderstand what's happening here. Jairus has lost everything. I mean, I don't know about you, but if one of my children died, that would be the height of my despair. That would feel like the greatest loss. And so Jesus comes in and says, "Do not fear, only believe." And this is deeply powerful. He's not just glazing over what happens in Jairus' life, because he thinks, like, well, I've lost everything. Why are you telling me not to fear and have faith? First off, what does Jesus do? He acknowledges Jairus' pain. Why? Because he overhears this, and he doesn't wait till Jairus comes to him. He immediately, like he's still listening to the woman, overhears this, says, boom, don't fear, only have faith. Only believe. So Jesus doesn't dismiss, he doesn't ignore the pain of loss. Rather, he speaks directly into it. And when Jairus heard this devastating news of his daughter's death, Jesus immediately intervened with what? Hope. It's a hopeless time. What does Jesus immediately bring? He immediately brings hope, and he recognizes Jairus' grief, but he urges him towards faith instead of despair. And it's an invitation for Jairus to trust Jesus. It's an invitation for Jairus to trust Jesus. When we lose everything, be it relationships, finances, health, whatever is going on in our life, when we lose everything, the natural human response is fear. I'm not going to trust anybody. I'm scared. I'm in despair, hopelessness. These are the natural human responses. But Jesus' words, do not fear, only believe, invite us to shift our focus from our circumstances to what? To Jesus' character, to his power and his presence. I mean, man, if I could get most people to trust the character of Christ, then most people would stay faithful their entire life. And this is what Jesus is saying. Trust me that I am who I say I am. When I'll take care of you, when I'll never leave you, when I'll get you to cross to the other side, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so it's an invitation to trust in Jesus. It's a call not to deny reality, but to believe that Jesus can redeem even the most hopeless situations. Man, we look at things in life and we think, oh man, like we look at people and the way they live their life, and we say, I don't know if they could ever come to Christ. But I want you to understand, no one is too far gone. Man, God can redeem even situations that seem where there is no hope. They are completely hopeless. Say, my marriage is dead. But God can redeem even the most hopeless situations. And so Jesus, he's acknowledging his pain, he's inviting him to trust, and he's giving him hope beyond the circumstances. Jesus is teaching him that your current circumstances do not have the final word. Your current circumstance does not have the final word, even when the situation feels beyond repair. Faith allows us to trust that Jesus can and will bring restoration, peace, and purpose. Jairus thought he'd lost everything. Yet Jesus showed him and is going to show him what seemed final was not beyond his power. And finally, Jesus is calling us to an eternal perspective. I've said this a lot, but a lot of times in life today, we do not have an eternal perspective. Our lens is so focused on here and now. And ultimately, this command of Jesus' statement, do not fear, only have faith, is about viewing life through an eternal lens. Our greatest loss is never beyond his power to redeem. Faith is trusting that God sees our pain, walks with us through it, and promises restoration. Sometimes here and now, but always in eternity. Always in eternity. In life's moments of profound loss and desperation, fear often overtakes us. Yet Jesus calls us beyond fear. And he calls us to believe, even when we can't yet see the outcome. Desperation might seem like the end, but in Jesus' hands, it is only the beginning of restoration. Your desperation is the beginning of restoration in the hands of Jesus. And he invites us to trust him in his redemptive power and his renewal and his hope beyond our immediate circumstances. So let's keep going on. In verse 37, then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John. So Jesus had a crowd follow him the whole time. Now he says, nope, no one else is coming with me except Peter, James, and John. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. And he went inside and asked, why all the commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave. And he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Now listen, Jesus will confront unbelief and doubt. I need you to know that. But when you're waiting on a miracle, you need to be careful who you surround yourself with. If you got people who are going to mock the idea that a miracle is going to happen, if you got people who are saying, I don't know why you're even bothering the teacher, I don't know why you're even going to waste his time, you need to excuse those people out of your life. You need to remove them from the room. What does Jesus do? When it gets serious, when it's time to go, when he's going to go perform a miracle, he takes his 3 closest friends and tells everybody else, get away. When you're waiting on a miracle, when you need God to move in your life, when you're getting desperate, you got to get rid of the people in your life who are speaking the wrong things. Just like we talked about last week, that the words you say create the atmosphere around you, the people that you let in your life, that you let speak into your life, also create an atmosphere around you. And so you have to make sure, if you're waiting on a miracle, if you need to have hope, then you got to get the people who keep speaking hopelessness out of your life. And if you need a miracle in life, there are always going to be people you are going to have to remove. And you're going to have to find your people who do speak life, who walk with you in faith, who believe with you. And those are the people you need to bring along into the room with you. You've got to remove the people who are an obstacle. And at Jairus' home, Jesus confronts unbelief directly by dismissing the mourners who scoff at the possibility of a miracle. Let's go on. Verse 41. And holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened, and then he told them to give her something to eat. Restoration is the return of something to a former, original, normal, unimpaired condition. Jesus demonstrates his authority over death and his ability to restore completely by bringing Jairus' daughter from death to life and restoring the woman's health. But he didn't just restore that woman's health, he also restored her dignity. He restored her to where she was in the community. And so he's demonstrating his divine power to take desperation and move it to restoration. To his authority over death itself, he's speaking life into Jairus' daughter with a simple command. Little girl, get up. And the restoration of life underscores Jesus' identity. His identity over life and death. Foreshadows his own resurrection. Let me tell you something. You and I, we're in a very desperate situation. We're in a very desperate situation because here's the reality. Sin came into the world. When Adam and Eve were first, everybody's perfect. Sin comes in. Now we are no longer in that state. We are all dying. Death. You are dead. Ephesians 2 says you are dead in your trespasses. Dead in your sin. And Jesus, he is bringing a resurrection to each and every one of us. When we come to know Jesus, he speaks life into our life. And we come alive. And we are restored back to where we are originally meant to be. See, restoration is possible, but it's only possible through Jesus. And he can restore what seems irrevocably lost. And here's the thing, man, Jesus meets us exactly where we are. Jairus is desperate because of a present circumstance that has driven him to that moment of being completely desperate. And Jesus says, I'm coming with you. The woman, she has a persistence. 12 years. She's been to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. She's probably prayed that prayer, I don't know how many times. Can you heal me, God? So persistent now, she's willing to break the law to go touch Jesus. So you may have a persistent faith. You may have hanging on by a thread faith. It doesn't matter what your level of faith is. Jesus will meet you exactly where you are. In another place in the Bible, there's a centurion. He comes to Jesus, and what does he say? He says, hey, I have a servant. He's sick. Jesus says, okay, I'm going to come to your house and heal him. Well, he said, oh, no. Yeah, no, I am a man of authority. I have men under me. When I say one goes, they go. If you'll just speak the word. And Jesus met him where his faith was. This is what I want to tell you. Jesus didn't turn away anybody. Another man comes and says, if you have faith, anything is possible if you have faith. And he says, well, help my unbelief. He didn't turn the man away. This goes back to that whole idea that we talked about earlier in Mark, that the faith of the size of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. It doesn't matter where your faith is. Jesus will meet you right where you are. Whether your faith is ragged and beat down, or you're in a moment of, I've been holding on to this for 12 years and I'm not stopping now. Nothing will keep me away from it. See, Mark shows that faith, regardless of its form, whether it's desperate, persistent, weak, or uncertain, is honored and affirmed by Jesus. Jesus doesn't require a flawless faith. Rather, he compassionately meets each person precisely where they're at. This is what I mean when I say Jesus is a personal God. And you have a personal relationship with him. Isn't it crazy to think about that? Like God has put all his effort into seeking me. But he has done the same for every single one of you. And every other person. That's how awesome God is. Only God can do that. So let me say this to you. Your desperation is the beginning of your restoration. And so, nothing in your life is beyond repair when it comes to Jesus. You can't blow it. You can't make a mistake that is so bad where God says, well, it's over. You're out. You went one time too many. It doesn't work that way. He's here for you. And all of us are going to experience desperation at some point. It is. It's true. At some point in life, we are all going to experience these moments of desperation, hopelessness, and despair. It's going to happen. The question is, when it happens, does it push you closer to God? Or does it push you away from God? And you have to make the decision in your mind now. That when despair comes, how will I react? Desperation does not have to be your final destination. It doesn't. Jairus and the woman both moved from desperation to restoration by placing their faith in Christ. And whatever your desperate situation is today, Jesus lovingly invites you. Do not fear. Only